When there is an absence of information or an absence of conversation, what fills in the silence is shame.
Welcome to the Couples Therapist Couch, the podcast for couples therapists, marriage counselors, and relationship coaches to explore the practice of couples therapy. And now, your host, Shane Birkel.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Couples Therapist Couch. This is the podcast that's all about the practice of couples therapy. I'm Shane Birkel. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm here to bring you the most up-to-date information on how to help people have a better relationship. So whether you're a therapist who's looking to learn more about working with couples or a person who just wants to have better relationships, I'm hoping that this information will be valuable for you. I try to bring on many of the leaders in the world of couples therapy for interviews. So if you're interested in this, definitely subscribe and like the episode. I'd be really, really grateful for that. And if you're interested in the Couples Therapist Inner Circle, there's more information about that in the show notes, and you can click the link to find out more. So thank you so much. Please click subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Couples Therapist Couch. This is Shane Birkel, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Alexandra Solomon, therapist, professor, speaker, and author of 3 books, including her newest, Love Every Day. Hey Alexandra, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shane. It's great to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, great to see you too. I was just looking back at the other episode that we did, and it came out in February of 2020. So it was right before all of the craziness of COVID happened. And I can't believe that we're heading into the winter here where that's going to be 4 years ago. That's crazy.
That is crazy. That is crazy. Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah,
we were due for another conversation.
absolutely. Absolutely. And last time, by the way, for all you listeners out there, that was episode number 114. If you enjoy our conversation today, you might want to go back and check that out. And we were talking about your book, Taking Sexy Back, at that time. And Alexandra's also written a best-selling book called Loving Bravely. So, yeah, but today I'm excited to talk about your new book, Love Every Day. And why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and what you've been up to the last couple of years?
Yeah, yeah. So right, so my third book, my new book, just came out a little over a month ago in October 2023, and that was really a wonderful project for me. I've been working closely with Psychotherapy Networker, which we were just talking before we started recording. It's a conference that you and I both love, the biggest gathering of therapists, really sort of the premier conference for therapists. And I've been on their faculty for many, many years and written for Psychotherapy Networker many times. And just sort of I'm always a yes whenever they ask me to do something. And so Psychotherapy Networker is partner with Pessy, and they have a publishing wing. And Pessy approached me and they were like, would you like to make a workbook? And I was like, well, not a workbook, but I do have this idea. I always, my whole life, have loved these one a day books,
Mm-hmm.
where you open it and there's just an entry for every day of the year. And I always have found them to be just really generous offerings from an author, and also just really helpful to have like a little dose of something self-reflective, something insightful. And I also have been accumulating all of these basically mini essays because I've been posting on social media so consistently for so many years. And social media is so ephemeral, it's sort of there on your screen and then it's gone. And so over the years, we've gotten hundreds of DMs of, you did an entry last week about, this topic. Can you send it to me? Or, I can't find it. Or don't you remember when you did? And then a few people were like, can you just put these into a book? And so basically, this book was sort of birthed from that place of how might we create micro doses of relational self-awareness, which is the through line in all of the work that I do, is helping people more deeply understand themselves in the context of their relationships. And so that was where the idea for the book was born. And Pessy Publishing just was the most wonderful partner in this project. We created a really, really beautiful book. It just feels good in your hands. It's got a darling navy blue silky bookmark so people can, kind of keep their place. And so that's been a real labor of love, as all books are. And I'm so glad that it's out in the world.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's so true what you're talking about with social media posts. I'll often see things and I'll think, oh, that's great. And then, you never go back to it or you can never find it again. And, it's nice to have it in the format of a book where people can really, keep coming back to it. Like you said, read through it every day. So is it designed that you go through one at a time from the beginning to the end, or how is it set up?
So because we were really, my team and I were like, okay, so how do we make sure that the reader has everything they need? So it is organized. Like if you bought the book on June 13th, you would just open it up to June 13th and whatever is there waiting for you, that's your entry for the day. And then you can come back June 14th and do that one. Like there's one for every single day, but maybe you don't come back until July 12th, and then you just pick up where you left off, because it's not for any particular year. You just have it for, the rest of your life. But we didn't want to leave it there. So we also we kind of basically factor analyzed or categorized all the entries into 9 big themes, like healing from the past, cultivating self-compassion, sexual self-awareness, stages of love, relationship problems. We have 9 categories and each of them has a color code. So if on a given day the entry is about self-compassion, but you want an entry that's more about healing from the past, you can flip through until you find one that is that color. So we also
Oh,
just
that's
wanted
great.
people to have, yeah. And I also like the idea of using it almost like a little, like one of those kind of oracle decks that people have, where they kind of shuffle the cards and just pull one. So you also could just open to any page and just have that be your entry for the
Yeah,
day.
I
So
love
lots
that.
of lots of permission. Yeah, lots of permission, lots of different ways of using it.
Yeah, but that's a good point. If healing from the past was something that was a thing for me, I could just sort of target all of those pages and go through
Mhm.
all that at once, which would be cool.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of relationship books that I've read, I'm sure you've never read any of these, where it just feels like really heavy to wade through, and some of them are extremely good and beneficial, but it's a whole thing to sort of undertake, and it can get hard to sort of
Mhm.
like get from one, it's like you can only handle so much per day.
Right.
Um and but I love the idea of these kind of, quick hits that people can read for the day, and it gives them something to really focus on and get clear
Mhm.
about, and it's not the same thing as one of those other books I'm describing.
Right. And I think there's a place. I think that there's what's beautiful about this whole realm of relationships and self-help, resources, is that there are different teachers who land. I know there have been chapters of my life where particular teachers are so sacred to me and I want to devour everything they've ever written and said. And then then there's another teacher at a different moment in my life, or there's one format that really resonates for me at one time in my life, and then a different format. So I think that you're right. We need those kind of heavy start to finish books at some points in our journey. And then sometimes a book like Love Every Day, where you just have a micro dose, or I've heard so many sweet stories now that the book's been out for like a month, of couples, who like it's their Sunday morning routine. Like they have a cup of coffee, they look at an entry together, they have a conversation, or they take it out, read something and then go for a walk. So it's really fun to hear, some beginning to hear stories of how individuals and couples are using a resource like this. But I hear you. We need lots of resources at different points in our journey or our own, kind of relationship development.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually, as I'm thinking about it, I think I originally heard about you because you were teaching a relationship course at, I believe, Northwestern or some university.
Exactly.
And which I thought was such a cool thing. This was probably many years ago, you know. Um and but I'd love to hear, sort of how you approach that, how you teach people about relationships versus like doing therapy with people, and,
Mhm.
what led you to write all of the books that you've written so far?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, that really, so the class is sort of in a cheeky way called Marriage 101.
Hmm.
It is technically called Building Loving and Lasting Relationships, Marriage 101, but, around campus it's known as Marriage 101, which is, it was the title. So when this spring, I will teach it for the, oh, I keep saying 23rd time. It's the 24th time this spring.
Oh my
Gosh,
gosh.
the
That's so
24th
cool.
year of teaching it. That's just wild. And
Yeah.
so the first year it was taught was 2000, and I was 20, I was probably a 24-year-old. No, not quite 24. Anyways, younger than I am now, graduate student. And so I didn't have a hand in naming the course. I was a grad student. I was the first teaching assistant, and I was one of the lecturers for the course. And that name actually suited the class well because it was originally conceptualized as a course about marriage. And so it was all about marital sexuality and marital challenges. And the idea was to educate, emerging adults about marriage so that they would choose suitable partners and have the skills they needed. And in the year 2000, the age of entry into marriage was around 23, 24, 25. So
Wow.
when you're teaching college juniors and seniors, they're pretty close to, many of them were pretty close to the doorstep of marriage. We had engaged students in the class. We had couples, really well-established couples in the class. Well, fast forward to 2024, the age of entry, there has been a significant drop just in these 24 years in the percentage of the population that is married, right? We now have the lowest percentage of married couples we've ever had.
Hmm.
And the age of entry into marriage is older than it ever has been. So 28, 29, 30.
Interesting.
So this idea of
Mm.
marriage, if I start talking about marriage, I become like Charlie Brown's teacher, like wah, 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 wah. Like it just feels far away from many of them.
Oh yeah,
And
for 19 and 20-year-olds. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
far, not for all of them. I think for students who come from more religiously conservative backgrounds, more rural backgrounds, more military backgrounds, like for those students, they are, they're pretty well on their way. But we have lots of students who've yet to hold somebody's hand or yet to be, have much of any relationship experience, or who are really working expansively in the realms of polyamory and consensual non-monogamy and sort of deconstructing the institution of marriage in their own minds and really questioning what is the right partnership model for me. So I don't even know how many times I use the word marriage in the course. And it really is a course about relational self-awareness, understanding who you are, the messages you've received, the inheritance you have from your family of origin around relationships. And then from there, they're going to have to just figure out their own path, So we talk, and we also talk now. We didn't do this for the first, whatever, 10, 15 years of the class. I talk about dating apps. I talk about hookup culture and situationships. I talk about breakups. I talk about long distance relationship, moving in together. So things that are not marital topics, but the sort of what I call from here to I do topics, everything that kind of
Hmm.
meets them where they are right now. And so it's been fun for the class to grow with me, like I was newly married and not a parent when I first started teaching the class. And now, I've been the primary faculty member for the class for probably about 15 years at this point. And I now have kids who are the age of of the students I teach, which is like the weirdest, like time warp of my whole life.
Right. Right. Well, I love hearing what you're saying, right? Because I think it is good to disentangle the idea of marriage from the idea of being prepared for relationships, because
Yeah.
even when kids are young, I won't even say I mean teenagers, and definitely when they're in college, that those ages, I think it's so important that they learn how to have a healthy relationship. And they may not ever get married, or they may not get married for a long time, but I think growing up, and I don't know what you think about this, but like growing up in our families, we don't necessarily learn good relationship skills or things like boundaries or understanding the influence our family of origin had on us and all of those things. And so a class like that is super important no matter where someone is in their relationship status,
Yeah.
so that they just have that self-awareness. So that's great.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The research, I think this is, um, one of my sort of soapboxes that I tend to get on is the way that we culturally diminish or downplay the romantic experiences of teens and emerging adults. When
Hmm.
what the research shows us is that those early dating and relationship experiences are the foundation of long-term partnerships. So young people really, really deserve to have the skills they need when they are young and they're moving into and out of relationships. Because even if they don't become a marriage, they are the template, like they are the early kind of training grounds. And I think that we culturally don't elevate those. We sort of talk about crushes or what do you really know about love. And this really came home for me so profoundly. A few years ago, I was the chair of an undergraduate student's honors thesis, and she was
Hmm.
in the School of Education and Social Policy, and her project was she she did a kind of content analysis or kind of coding. She coded themes in three of the major progressive sex education curricula that are available. She really wanted to study kind of the sex education that happens in the US. So she pulled the most progressive curricula, the ones that, that really are committed to being sex positive, not doing a lot of like shaming messages, not a heavy-handed, danger and risk one. So she wanted to code for themes of pleasure, for themes around gender. And the thing that as we went into that analysis, the thing that we found that we were not expecting to find is that even in these very progressive curricula, there were messages that the curriculum was giving that was like, you're a teenager, it's puppy love, and these aren't real relationships, and like really
Hmm.
kind of subtly, well, maybe not even subtly, um, diminishing the importance and value and seriousness of adolescent relationships. And I think that struck me. It struck both of us. We hadn't anticipated that going in, that we would find that kind of I mean, it feels disrespectful, to say that just
Yeah.
because you're young, you don't understand love. It's not. It doesn't look like the love you will have when you're 30, but it doesn't need to. It doesn't need to be significant, to matter.
Right. And I'm assuming I'm interested what you found as far as how much teaching there is about relationships. Obviously it's to teach about sexual education, but how much of that sort of relational ideas was coming into it.
Yeah. Well, these progressive ones really were quite lovely around talking about emotions and communication.
Oh, that's
But
great.
but that is I mean, it's a small percentage of kids in the US who actually get these curricula. They are largely
Okay.
through like progressive, churches. But yeah, the sex education that the majority of public school kids get, no, there is little to no relationship education, and it is very much predominantly fear-based. There's no requirement, only a handful of states, maybe like 25 to 30 states, even require that sex ed curriculum be medically accurate. So there's not even a
Wow.
requirement around medical accuracy. It is by and large. I mean, we talk, in the Marriage 101 class, we talk about their sex ed experiences, and I'm horrified year after year. Like this past year, I was horrified at what these kids learned in their, what these college students had been told when they were in high school. They had many of my college students who were educated in the public school system received what's called object lessons. Is that a term that you've heard?
No, I don't know what that means.
Oh, an object lesson is when the sex ed teacher takes like a piece of scotch tape and
Uh-huh.
like, she sticks it to her arm and passes it to a student and they stick it to their arm, and every student sticks a piece of tape to their arm, and then it comes back to the teacher and the teacher says, this is what happens to your ability to attach when you have multiple partners. This tape was sticky, but then when
Oh,
we all had it on our arm, it lost its ability to be sticky. That's what happens when you have multiple sexual partners.
oh
That's
my
an object.
gosh.
That's an
Yeah.
object lesson. So that's our
Okay.
tax dollars hard at work.
Oh my goodness. Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, do you have any ideas of how we could begin to teach kids at a younger age about relationships?
I think, as I watch kind of the intersection of politics and education here at the, in the US, and the ways in which the educational policy has been co-opted, by very, very conservative, um, religiously founded, beliefs and ideas. I don't think we're going in a direction where sex education is going to become more comprehensive. It's going to become more polarized, more ideological. So I think that
Mhm.
there's just a responsibility on parents,
Yeah,
parents
definitely.
and I think my vision would be like communities of parents coming together and getting a curriculum and kind of taking responsibility for, figuring out what are the ways that what are the messages that they want to convey? How do they want to convey it? Who are the parents who they can kind of work together with and brainstorm ideas? Because I don't think that it's something that we're going to be able to leave to schools, unfortunately, because it has,
Yeah.
even though there's clear research, there's kind of two big camps, like sex education curricula are either abstinence only, which is
Hmm.
the majority of what's taught in the US, or
Right.
comprehensive. And the research is super, super clear that when you teach comprehensive sex education, which is basically how to have safer sex when you decide to have it, you delay you delay sexual initiation. Like, students
Uh-huh.
will quote unquote lose their virginity at an older age,
Hmm.
and you reduce sexual violence, obviously, and you reduce unintended pregnancies. So there
Okay.
are really clear outcomes of comprehensive sex education. Abstinence
Yeah.
only sex education does nothing. Saying one partner only within marriage, that kind of messaging doesn't delay onset of sex, and it sets kids up to not know how to be safe when they do have sex. So you
Exactly.
increase unintended pregnancies. So the
Yeah.
data is there. The data is there. Oh, under Obama's presidency, Obama was funding comprehensive sex ed. There was a ton of data coming out. We were getting really good results. And then when Trump became president, a lot of that funding was stripped away. And so now we're starting to see the results kind of reversing.
Yeah, and I'm even thinking about like, you know, it to bypass the sexuality thing because, like you said, it's so influenced by a lot of different viewpoints,
Mm-hmm.
to sort of come at an angle of here's how to have healthy boundaries for yourself as a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
of a relationship class. Here's how to value yourself. Here's how to have healthy
Mm-hmm.
something like
Yeah.
that. And,
Yeah.
it might make people feel more comfortable no matter what their viewpoints are about
Mm-hmm.
sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an interesting angle, right? Where if you found it more in relationships versus sexuality, then I think you do bypass a lot of that activation
Hmm.
that gets going. And there's a public health element, right? Kids deserve to understand what's happening in their bodies, even around, puberty and
Oh yeah.
menstruation. And for kids of all genders to understand menstruation and, you know,
Mhm.
all of it, like just everything that happens within the adolescent body. But I hear you that that's where people get dicey and sensitive and all of that stuff. I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if
Yeah.
we
Certainly not easy answers.
yeah, definitely. No, and
Mhm.
I appreciate you speaking to it. And these are huge, like, things that the government would need to vote on and like when we start talking about education policy and things like that, it becomes very big. Um,
It becomes really big. Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
but just to sort of fast forward to when kids are like college age, or 20s, or adults of any age, really. Um, I think one of the things that happens when they receive these messages, either from their families or from the schools or from society, is that, it becomes very stressful and overwhelming for people and confusing if they don't have the information. And I think a lot of people end up sort of blaming themselves, going into sort of a shame feeling about what's wrong with me that I don't know how to have sex, or what's wrong with me that I
Right.
don't know how to have a relationship, or what's wrong with me that I can't communicate better or something. And I
Hmm.
think obviously that's probably a big thing that we do often in therapy is try to reframe
Mm.
that for people and help people with those beliefs that are carried from this messed up system that we all come from.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think you're right that when there is an absence of information or an absence of conversation, what fills in the silence is shame.
Hmm. Oh, that's
because
great. Yeah.
yeah, because we're taught, especially, I mean, shame and sex are so at risk of going together, even at the best of times. People who are married, who are, who enjoy, sexual connection with their spouse, they can experience shame, right? So if even those of us who are in established relationships are vulnerable to having some shame, like, what's wrong with my desire? What's wrong with my interest? Why am I not more, available? Whatever, if we're at risk of experiencing shame, certainly, certainly, right, kids and teens and young adults who don't have safe places to turn and ask questions and have conversation and have access to information are ripe for experiencing shame. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, and that's why I'm such a huge fan of you, because I feel like, you're all about sort of providing the education for people, providing the reassurance that there's nothing wrong with you, giving people
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
validation and self-esteem and valuing them,
Mhm.
so thank you for all,
Mm.
all of your writing and all of your social media posts and all that you do for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It
Yeah.
is a privilege and a pleasure for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about, if we're talking about, the things that are necessary to have a healthy relationship, that, some of the core, obviously every situation is unique and different, but have you found some core principles or foundational things that are really helpful for people to, going into any relationship?
Mm. I feel like the word, now that I have my own podcast, not as many episodes as you have. You're one of the OGs. You've been at this for a long time. What
Mhm.
episode, where are you now in your
This will
podcast
be
journey?
almost 200. I can't remember exactly, 190 something maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we just crossed
Yeah.
100, so we're
Oh, that's
hanging in there.
great.
We're
Yeah.
So it's funny when I'm sure you've noticed this also, like in my podcasting journey, it's like I hear myself a lot,
Uh-huh.
and I hear like the word I feel like I probably use more than any other word is curiosity, or
Yeah.
being curious. And I think
Yeah.
that is probably, if I had to choose like one central like principle for a healthy relationship, it is that ability to be curious, ability to notice when you have lost the ability to be curious, when you've gotten yourself in a place where you're just really sure that you understand what your partner did and what this is all about, noticing that and noticing that, that sense of like being sure and clear is the enemy of curiosity, and then kind of
Mhm.
figuring out how do you move back towards curiosity. I think that probably is a really, and I think about like when I've worked with I just had this experience this morning. I'm seeing a couple that we've been working, and we have had our sleeves rolled up, like
Mhm.
working really diligently, the three of us, for years at this point. And I just noticed this morning what a, like, I almost imagine like inside their chests and bellies, like space, like they felt really spacious to me. Like they felt, and they were, for the entire session, they were curious, they
Uh-huh.
were like, just like, I don't know how to say it, but I could feel, and I could like almost feel what it might be like inside of their bodies as they had that like bigger ability to stay curious versus that like constriction, right? And like, no, but
Mhm.
this, no, it's like this. And that kind of certainty that ends up shutting down conversation, shutting down connection.
Yeah, absolutely. And if, as therapists, if people come into our office and you see a lot of the constriction and you see a lot of the being right,
Yeah.
wanting to be right, and you see a lot of that lack of curiosity. I mean, why do you think, what is it about people in relationships that makes that curiosity hard before they learn some of the things that you're talking about?
Well, I think one, and I'm curious what you would add. I'm curious what you would add to this. I think one of the blocks is that I think that we confuse curiosity and we I think we confuse curiosity with weakness.
Mm-hmm.
That if I'm asking, if I'm confused, if I change my perspective, I thought I was thinking like this, but now when I hear you say that, now I'm going to stand over here and see it a little differently. Those are things that I think we are culturally taught are signs of weakness. I think that we're
Yeah.
taught like, I think there's a gender. Uh, I think there's a gender piece that cuts both ways. I think for those who've been socialized
Definitely.
in the masculine, for men, right? The old stereotype about men don't ask for directions, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
and that I think it's sort of that's a I think that stereotype will die now that we all have maps on our phones. But that was like always like
Right.
when I was growing up, like that
That's
was
a
a
good point.
stereotype. Like men, they never ask for directions. That idea that like to be confused, to have to ask questions means
Mhm.
you're not being a man. You're not manly. You're weak.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think there's
To
ways in
have
which
needs at all.
yeah, I think we shame men out of being curious or asking or going, huh, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Oof, I don't know. I didn't, you know what? I hadn't thought of it that way, but now that you say it, I think I see where you're coming from. That is not
Yeah.
something we're taught to like praise and celebrate in boys and men.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And
that's
I think
great.
And I think for women, I think we are taught women are given the opposite message that you are the ones who get relationships and relationships. And so that shuts down curiosity. It's like, no, I know what you meant when you said
Mhm.
this. And I think there's a way in which women are at risk of like kind of like relational haughtiness that
Yeah,
goes against curiosity.
right. They sort of become the expert,
Uh-huh.
and what I've observed is that they're often right, right? They'll start
Hmm.
saying like, "Well, you're just being defensive and you're just doing this and you're not really listening." And they're right, but
Yeah.
they're moving away from openness or
Right.
curiosity or vulnerability at that point.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Because they are critiquing their partner's behavior versus talking about what the impact of their partner's behavior is having on them.
Right. Right. That's what I was gonna say, in addition to what you're talking about, which is so good. I was thinking also that, if my partner says, "Hey, when you said those words to me, it was really hurtful." One of the things that happens in my mind is like, I want to convince you that I wasn't trying to be hurtful to you. So
Yeah.
I'm not being curious anymore. I'm saying, well, you shouldn't have felt hurt by that. I was just trying to speak about the weather, and I don't
Uh-huh.
understand why, you're hurt. So I'm no
Yeah.
longer listening and being curious about my partner's experience. At that point, I'm just trying to explain it away or be defensive or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
else.
Ugh, I hated, I really, and I'm using the word hate on purpose here. I hated reading the Gottman's research about how, intent, because what you're speaking to is intent versus impact, right? Like you
Hmm.
want to show your partner you had really benign intent because you actually did have benign intent. You were not trying to hurt your partner, but your benign
Right.
intent doesn't matter. All that matters is her
That's right.
is your partner's, the impact. And so I hated reading the Gottman research that completely reinforced that benign intent doesn't matter. What matters is the harmful impact. I was like, God damn it. Of course, you guys are proving the hard thing once again, because
Hmm.
I feel like that even as a couples therapist, when a couple is like replaying a painful interaction, I so want to say, because the partner who's done harm feels like shit, right? They don't
Hmm.
want, unless you're a
That's right.
sociopath, like you don't want to do harm to your partner. And so it's like a knee jerk inside of me is to be like, but wait, they didn't mean it, but they didn't mean it. And I know, that is not going to get us anywhere
Yeah.
positive. Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so hard to move away from right and wrong thinking,
Yeah.
to move into the flexibility of it's both, right?
Mm-hmm.
My partner cares about me and loves me and doesn't want to hurt me, and I'm really hurt and need to give them feedback about what they're doing, right?
Yep.
It's like that becomes very difficult for couples if they don't have the relational skills or the communication skills.
Yep. Yep. But I tell you what, as that partner who's prone to defensiveness and explanation, as that partner really does grow the capacity for not melting into shame, right? Because I think
Mhm.
shame becomes the driver of explanation. I'm
Yep.
trying to explain myself to you because I feel ashamed of what I did. As that partner can like have increasing bandwidth for tolerating that sting of, oh, I hurt my partner even though I didn't mean to, then the partner becomes more benign when they bring it up, right? Then the partner can start to say, listen, I know you didn't mean to hurt me. Listen, I know that my skin is really thin right now because of XYZ, right? The partner can start to scaffold the delivery of the feedback. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like they can make
Absolutely.
sure But if you ask what I found is if you ask the hurt partner to scaffold the feedback before you've asked the defensive partner to get less defensive, the hurt partner's gonna be like, "Are you kidding me? You're
Right.
asking for more emotional labor from me? I already told you that I'm hurt, and now you're asking me to, like, cushion my hurt so that my partner can, so that it's palatable to my partner." So, I
Yes.
think, and you tell me, but I think the first move is to really help that defensive partner just have some skills to, like, not get swept up in the defensiveness.
100%. I'm so glad you're saying that. I think there's an order to these things. This is something
Yeah,
that I think a lot of couples therapists actually get wrong, where they're trying too hard to maintain a sense of neutrality and make both people feel heard and understood. And I think that it's actually important that we focus on one issue before another. And
yeah,
there might be some different ways of looking at that, but the example you're giving is right on, that I'm not going to ask this person to open up and be vulnerable about their reality if all I've seen from the other partner is defensiveness and shutting it down and the
yep,
inability to hear and listen and understand. So I need to teach them about listening before
yep,
I'm going to ask their partner to have a
yep.
voice. Absolutely.
Especially if the hurt partner is a woman and the defensive partner is a man.
Agreed.
Especially. The
There,
moment you start to ask a hurt woman to soften, to, like, kind of deliver her description of her hurt feelings in a more palatable way to a partner, you've lost her. She's gonna be like, "I'm sorry, what are you asking of me? More emotional labor, really?" So
yeah.
I think especially when the gender is laid out like that,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah, 100%. And as you said before, it doesn't mean that the male partners in these examples don't have good intentions or are nice people, but there's just so much thousands of years of patriarchy that are coming into that moment that inform a
yeah,
certain way that things are happening that we have to be mindful of, or we run the risk of not being helpful to the couple.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, and then, like you were saying, the order of things, it's the only way to then also get to a point where we can invite her to look at. I think there's a way in which, and we'll stick with the gender, so I do think it plays out this way frequently, where she's got almost like an investment, like not an investment in her, because it makes it sound kind of intentional, but we're focusing on how she's been hurt keeps all 3 of us from looking at how she's being hurtful, her
Hmm.
contribution to it. And I think it's so easy because of patriarchy for women to feel really, really powerless and have a really hard time seeing how actually incredibly powerful they are in their relationships. Like the way in which, I mean,
Hmm.
I've spent whatever, 25 years now with mostly heterosexual couples, and I watch how husbands completely key their sense of self on how she's looking at him, the
Hmm.
reflection of him in her eyes. And I'm not saying that's like good or right, but I think it's really easy for women to miss that. I think women tend to feel invisible, diminished, and voiceless in ways that they are not. Because what I see from my therapist chair is I see him watching her. I see him
Hmm.
okay when she's pleased and very much not okay on the inside when she's not pleased. And I think
Hmm.
it's hard to get her to understand that and notice that.
Yeah, and I think everything we're talking about hinges on the shame and the solution to shame, or the opposite of that, which is someone valuing themselves and having a healthy self-esteem.
Mm,
And so I think that becomes part of the work too. And I know it's a dance, right? Sometimes there isn't a straightforward way that this all plays out when we're working with couples,
yeah.
but I want to move that male partner that you're describing into the idea of valuing themselves and feeling a healthy self-esteem and feeling like, you know, I can listen to feedback from my partner, and a big in my mind, or in
Mm,
the way that I work, a big part of that is going into the family of origin and
yeah.
understanding the beliefs that you're bringing into the present moment, which is another thing, that people tend to be sort of dismissive of the impact of their parents or their family of origin into how much it affects them,
Yes. A
you
hundred
know?
percent.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I agree. That's a huge part of the way that I work as well. And I'm glad that you're bringing up that part about like that's especially when you're working with men and the kind and the sort of like stereotype, that we're indulging ourselves in like a lot of stereotypes here. And
Yes,
I
yes,
know in
that's
this
right.
conversation,
That's
and
right. It's not always
um, no,
100%, but
no,
yeah.
and there's a thousand variations of this dance, but I think that you're right, is that, even if and as we help the female partner understand how powerful she is, then we don't want her to feel burdened, like, shit, all right, now my husband's self-esteem rests on my praise of him, my appreciation of him. No, he needs to be
Yeah.
sourcing his worth from inside, and that's what you're speaking to, and understanding why that sensitivity to being misperceived or not held in warm regard, like that didn't start in his marriage. That started in his family of origin, like you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
perhaps from the whole society at large. And
100%.
and women need to, learn how to value themselves as well. But I think, and like you said, it's not 100%. I mean, it could be, there are unique cases in every situation and different ways of working with people. But I
Mhm.
think there are some ways that are influenced by the way we're socialized under patriarchy
Yeah,
that, make it so that there are dynamics that we see often
that's right.
between
That's right.
couples where one identifies as a man and one as a woman.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, but I think you're making a good point too about sometimes there is resistance to looking at the impact of the past. And I think
Hmm.
two sources of that resistance that I can think of off the top of my head. One is it feels like an excuse. Sometimes people are like, there's no
Hmm.
point in talking about my parents because I'm responsible for my life today. It doesn't matter what happened in my past. Doesn't matter what happened in my partner's past. Like we're responsible for ourselves today. So I think there's a resistance or a fear that if we talk about that sort of inheritance stuff, that we're taking responsibility off of ourselves. And I think the other one is it can feel awfully disloyal that if I start to get
Oh yeah.
critical of things in my family, that somehow I'm saying I don't also appreciate them. And I think that is true. I think that's true for all family. I see it a lot in my first generation clients and my first generation
Yeah.
students where they're just like, my parents gave everything,
Yeah.
to and sacrifice so much and in order to create a sense of like safety for me and my siblings. And so how dare I critique? So I think there's a couple of those. Those are just two of the ways that I think people get sensitive to looking at the past. And so that work has to always be done just with the most gentleness and like holding that like dialectic, holding that both and of my parents did the best they could do at the time they were doing it. And I have to look at the things that I didn't get or that didn't go the way that I needed them to go so that I can start to take responsibility today.
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you were talking about earlier, as far as intent is not the same as impact. Right. So it's
Mm,
recognizing my parents love me and
yeah.
cared about me and would have done anything for me. And there were things that were happening that weren't weren't healthy for me. And that's influencing my beliefs in this present day relationship
Yep.
or who I am.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, as the parent of emerging adults, I think that's a lot of the conversations that we have in our house is like, I want to be a safe enough place for our kids to talk about all the experiences they had growing up, the ones where they felt really supported and the moments they didn't feel supported or understood by my husband or, and me mostly. Mostly me. I think I get it more than my husband does. They give him a pretty nice pass. And I, and that's like those conversations are really like tender and difficult. And um I gotta walk my talk.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think it's so healthy, to have those conversations with our kids and to show them it's okay to make mistakes. I think
Hmm.
that's a huge part of, to go back to that thing we were talking about originally, where people have a hard time with curiosity. I think part of that is like, you don't have to be right. You don't have to be perfect. Like, and modeling for our kids, like, hey, I make mistakes as a parent and you're going to make mistakes. And here's what we can do to repair if those
Yeah,
things happen.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a funny there's a funny side effect of being a parent who values self-awareness is like there was a time a few years ago where one of our, I will say it in the most general of terms, one of our kids was going through something difficult. And I put a hypothesis out there of the reason this thing is happening for you in this way is because of my blind spot or my growing edge as a parent. And this kid of mine said back to me, Mom, I would very much love to make this about you, but
Right.
it's not about you. It's me. This is my, so I think there's a way that us self-aware parents have a risk of like taking our kids' experiences and making them about us at times when they are just actually about our kids' journey. It's like almost like an overcorrection, like the parent who's like, I did the best I could. Take it to your therapist. I think there's a
Right.
problem on the other side of like, no, no, wait, you're having this problem because of me. Let me tell you how I did you dirty, and let me tell you
Right.
why.
Right. That's
My
interesting.
kids,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's not about you.
Right. Right. That's great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's good. Well, I know we're getting to the end of our time here. Can you say how people can find you as far as your website and mention your book again, so people can go out and get that?
Yeah. So my website is dralexandrasolomon.com. And there you'll find the entire ecosystem of podcast episodes and blog articles and e-courses and books and social media links. My Instagram is where I'm most active. That's dr.alexandra.solomon. And then, yeah, the new book is called Love Every Day, and it is available wherever books are sold. We love to send people to bookshop.org, at least people in the US to bookshop.org, because that's how we support the indie booksellers, which are oftentimes woman owned or BIPOC owned independent booksellers. So
Oh, great. Good.
that's,
Good.
yeah.
And what's the name of your podcast?
Reimagining Love.
Okay, great.
We are a weekly show, 100 episodes in, and we do a blend. We do the first 2 episodes of the month are solo episodes where I'm just kind of speaking to a relational knot or a dynamic. And then the rest of the episodes are guest conversations.
Oh, great. Great. And
Mhm.
if let's say that there's a therapist who this is the first time that they've heard of you and are finding out about you, what would be the first book you would recommend that they read? Would it be your new one or would it be one of the other ones?
I think probably the first book is Loving Bravely. Probably go
Loving
in that
Bravely.
order.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best because that's sort of like the big kind of primer, the big introduction to relational self-awareness. I also, for therapists, I have a lot of e-courses and workshops I've done for
Hmm.
therapists through Psychotherapy Networker. So if you go to Psychotherapy Networkers like courses and type in my name, you'll see I did an entire Loving Bravely e-course with Psychotherapy Networker, which is all about helping clients who are single, dating, and single again.
Hmm.
It's a comprehensive, great course, and lots of workshops that they will record and kind of share again. So that's a great place for therapists to go. And I mean, I think the podcast audience probably similar to yours. Probably, I don't think I probably have quite the percentage that you have, but I know there are a lot of therapists who listen to the podcast because I often get emails from people who are like, my therapist had me listen to this episode. And so it's also becomes, as I'm sure your episodes do, also becomes a nice resource for therapists to have to offer to their clients, a nice free resource. And
Yeah,
then,
definitely.
um,
Yeah, that's great.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a worksheet nerd. So when I make a solo episode, I often make a worksheet, like a companion worksheet.
Oh,
So
nice.
if somebody goes back to the catalog, they'll find a worksheet on jealousy, a worksheet on overfunctioning, underfunctioning, a worksheet on pace discrepancies in relationships. So it becomes you can really kind of build up your treasure trove. And we also have like a 60-page packet of all the worksheets available for sale on the website. So if you
Oh,
become
nice.
a Reimagining Love nerd and you really start diving into the catalog, you can also buy yourself it's like a $17 book of all the worksheets we've developed.
Oh, that's great. That's a great idea. Cool. Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much. I'll put the website and the podcast and the Instagram in the show notes so people can easily
great.
find them. And I follow you on Instagram. I would definitely recommend everybody follow you on Instagram. But thank you so much for taking the time here today. I really love talking to you, and hopefully we can catch up again at some point in the future. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching the show. I'm Shane Birkel, and this is the Couples Therapist Couch podcast, the podcast that's all about the practice of couples therapy. If you enjoyed the show, please hit subscribe. Please hit the like button. And you can continue to get all of the most up-to-date information in the world of couples therapy. If you are a therapist who's interested in learning more about the practice of therapy, or if you're someone who just wants to learn more about how to have a good relationship, definitely hit subscribe so you can get all of the latest episodes. Thank you so much. Also, if you're interested in the Couples Therapist Inner Circle, you can click on the link in the show notes. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Shane Birkel. This is the Couples Therapist Couch.